Hi everyone. Today I wanted to talk about relationships again. And particularly, I'm thinking a lot about my relationships that are unresolved currently. For example, like a relationship with my own father who doesn't speak to me anymore, or a whole bunch of my relatives actually who, you know, just don't speak to me. It wasn't like a kind of a conversation where we decided that we'll take a break, or it was just, a kind of a conflict, and after that, silence. And I often think about it, and it's, of course, extremely tempting to say every once in a while, what is wrong with me? And actually, I've been kind of analyzing what's in common with these relationships, and what has finally come out today, as I looked at every single relationship that is now in this unresolved state. And in fact, it came about, that falling out came about from the choice I made to speak up, to start putting my needs above other people's needs, to start thinking of myself before worrying about the comfort of others, or the other person in the relationship. And it's an interesting thing because, of course, it's out of character, right? The persona that I've created in childhood to assure that I am liked and that I belong was to create this good girl who then was a perfect chameleon, in that I sensed the energy of the situation, and I made sure to behave in a way. All this was happening unconsciously, of course. I made sure to behave in a way that made the situation pleasant for everyone, and of course my needs weren't figuring in my own calculation. And the thing is that as I was coming to my process of understanding who I am, this is what I realized, is that nobody could my partner, nobody could take care of my needs because I didn't have needs. I didn't know what my needs were. I had needs, obviously, like we all do, but I was completely unaware of them because all of my life I was focused on the needs of others from a very young age. So whatever relationships I was forming as a grown-up were just continuing that same pattern where my needs were unimportant, everybody else's needs were much more important, and in fact my whole focus was on other people's needs. I'm trying to make sure that the light is good. So what is interesting is that the people who don't talk to me now were so used to me behaving a certain way that when I started breaking out of that pattern, it felt like a threat. It felt like a threat. And what happens is that we have this mistaken tendency to think that when we feel good in the presence of somebody, that it is somehow thanks to these people. More obviously, we often, when we don't feel good in somebody's presence, when we're irritated by our partners, for example, or other people with whom we're relating, we also blame them for that state of irritation. This is what I deal with very frequently in my coaching sessions and in my own life, of course. So that irritation we feel when we're interacting with another person, we attribute it to that other person. What we really don't understand is that our irritation is ours, and the people with whom we're relating are just serve as the catalyst, the trigger, if you want, for these feelings to come to our awareness. Because, for example, if I live on my own, my apartment is, as clean or as messy as I love it. nobody interferes, nobody puts things away, or nobody messes it up. And so I am, I don't realize that, I'm basically, happy in that realm. Whereas when somebody, when we live with somebody, their ways of being are constantly challenging our state of peace because they're not like us. And of course, that is completely normal. What gets us upset often is when we realize that people with whom we share our lives or people with whom we're, close, are not like us. So to come back to what I started in the beginning of this recording is that, so the people with whom I'm in relationships, who some of these people have known me, these are family members. They've known me for a very, very, very long time. They've come to rely on their relationship with me feeling a certain way due to my habitual behavior. Basically, I was rarely a threat. Even if they, perhaps would get upset with me at some point, I would often frequently, make sure that everything comes back to normal. And I was a perfect, I am a highly sensitive person. And of course, I sensed every disharmony. And I would make sure that if I sense that something is off, I would make sure to do everything I can to bring all this back to at least surface feeling good for everyone. So when I stopped being concerned with everyone's well-being and started paying attention to my own, and I started speaking things that were truthful to me. For example, in the case of my father, I didn't even say anything particularly to upset him. I just shared with him something that was my experience. And sharing with him that my experience as his daughter was, less than perfect, was more than he could tolerate, and so it didn't end well. And other people in my, in relationships with me who are not talking to me now, it also came through a kind of a conflict. There was a difficult situation where, and I'm not saying that it was only them. I also am just learning how to be skilled at having difficult conversations. Nobody has taught me that. I'm actually learning through trial and error. And of course, the trials are with the, real people, real participants in my life. And so sometimes it comes out better than others. And so the resulting conflict is definitely a co-creation of all of us. I do own that. So what happens is that these disagreeable feelings that have come to the surface for all of us, the people who don't talk to me anymore, they, how do you call it? They assigned their own uncomfortable feelings to me and made me responsible for them. So that's where we stand. And that's, I think, such a big doorway into what makes our relationships difficult, because what I'm realizing is that, for example, at home, my state of irritation with my husband, it's very difficult to kind of stop and think that it's my irritation is mine and it's not because he's doing that, because it's so, in the moment, it's so obviously because he's doing something, a particular something that irritates me. But what I'm learning about more and more is that there is something about the way he's doing these things that irritate me that brings me back, that connects me back to old energy. It is some old energy from the past. It's very difficult to understand to what moment in the past it's attached. And actually, it's really not that important. The most important thing to understand in this moment is that whatever I'm feeling is mine. It comes from my own body. So when most often it's the reactions that I'm experiencing are not really to the moment that I'm describing or in which I'm feeling these feelings. So if we all start realizing in moments of conflict, in moments of great splash of emotion and reactivity, that people with whom we're reacting, people with whom we're experiencing these feelings did not do anything to us, that they're actually here to bring these feelings that were already within us to our attention. Basically, it's the feelings that are already within us that they, through this interaction, are bringing to our own awareness. They're bringing to our own awareness so we can understand them, and so we can process them, and so we can experience them, actually feel them. Because what happens is, through projecting on this other person and maybe screaming or maybe saying some words or maybe complaining to somebody or just like deflecting the actual feeling, we avoid going into the feeling. We take that energy that's starting to boil within us and push it onto the other person. What I'm proposing is actually staying with the feeling. It's the hardest thing to do because we really have no tolerance for it, and all of our nervous systems are wired post-trauma, and it's really difficult to stay with discomfort. It takes a lot of training, and yet it's that sitting with our own feeling. It's actually understanding that it's within our body, identifying where it is, and through certain somatic healing tools, try to process that energy so that it doesn't spill over on other people. And that could be, through putting your hand on the center of that sensation that you're experiencing. For example, in your heart, often we feel it in our throat. For me, it was very often in my throat. Of course, self-expression. And there are other techniques that are easily, we could easily find today. But basically, the whole point is to, as these feelings, as these reactions come to the surface, the point is to understand that it's happening in our body and that it's our responsibility to process these feelings so that we can then go into these relationships and say what we must say, not from that forceful, violent or angry energy, which doesn't really give us the results we want in communication, but through first regulating our own nervous system and then coming back to the conversation in a tone that is calm and regulated. And that gives us so much more of a chance that we'll be heard, that the person with whom we're trying to communicate difficult things will be actually open to hear us. So I'm attacked by a fly, so I'm going to finish the video. Thanks for being here with me. Please let me know how this lands and whether you have any questions. All right, everyone, see you soon.